11:55. Almost midnight. Enough time for one more story.
Look at me, sure. I'm the captain now.
Ahoy there. Welcome to Rated Aargh. Thank you for joining us on another adventure as we chart our course through the realms of cinematic piracy. Today, we're taking a look through our spyglass at John Carpenter's eerie tale, The Fog. My name is Ryan, and please join me in welcoming my co-captains, Christian and Braxton. Guys, happy spooky season.
This is the Halloween episode.
This is a Halloween episode. How excited are you guys about it almost being Halloween?
I like it.
Halloween is one of my least favorite holidays, actually. So
it's becoming more and more of a favorite for me. You know, it's going up in the rankings.
It's growing on me. Yeah, for a while it was literally my least favorite. As I've kind of gotten a little more into like watching scary movies and stuff, I've enjoyed it a little more. But I don't know. My favorite is Thanksgiving. I don't know what your guys' favorite holiday is.
That's crazy.
I get that a lot. People are like,
crazy.
"Why Thanksgiving?
Hey,
not Christmas?" And I'm like, "Okay, but hear me out. Thanksgiving,
respect.
You have no obligations. Like, you don't open presents. You don't do anything crazy. Like, you literally show up, you eat, you watch football, you hang out, and then you leave and you go to bed because you're tired after eating all the turkey."
I see that.
It's just nice and chill is why I like it, I think.
And there's football. Yeah.
That's what I said. Yeah, there's football. I mean, there's a lot going on.
There's
it's
turkeys playing football.
Not exactly.
No, but I would want to see that.
It's usually a little bit colder than Halloween. I feel like Halloween has been pretty warm last few years.
Well,
yeah.
In Texas, other places, it's not quite that way.
But yeah, I remember when I was a kid, it would be cold always.
Yeah.
And sometimes your costume would not be built for the cold. So you'd be like wearing your ninja suit and then you'd have your like jacket over it. And you wouldn't look like that cool of a ninja with your little jacket with a hood over your ninja costume.
I will say that Halloween is one of the more polarizing ones because it has its own month or like 2 months. Like they start putting out Halloween decorations 2 or 3 months early now.
Mm-hmm.
And so if you like it, then you basically get to have 2 months leading up to the holiday, like Christmas. Like the moment that you get through Thanksgiving, you're like, all right, we're going to celebrate Christmas every single day. But if you don't like either one of those holidays, you're just kind of stuck in an eternal, like, just misery, I guess.
Yeah, I can see that. All right. Well, I know this was my first time watching this movie. Braxton, I'm pretty sure you've seen it before. Is that right?
It was my second time watching it.
Okay. Christian, this was your first time, correct?
First time.
Okay. So we've got some pretty new, fresh eyes on this movie. Braxton, would you recommend that people watch it before getting too far into the episode?
I think you could listen to it without it, but I would recommend watching it. Because it's not that big of a mystery movie, but we are going to be talking spoilers that, will reveal parts of the plot and reveals of the movie.
And it's just really good. Like, I know.
So
this one,
I think it's worth a watch. If you're any sort of a horror fan, new or old or anything like that, it's worth watching one time.
And it's not like overly scary by any means.
No.
So I think that this one is a good, like, if you're not really into horror movies, like, this is a good one to watch. If you like horror movies, this is a great one to watch.
Yeah, absolutely.
It's kind of one of those that, is a pretty broad audience. And rather than me sit here and explain it to you, let's just take a look at the opening scene of the movie. It kind of just sets the premise for the movie. And I think tonight it's going to set the premise for this episode.
11:55. Almost midnight.
This guy's
Enough
great.
time for
She's
one
so
more
good.
story. 100 years ago, on the 21st of April, out
That sold it for me
waters
right there.
around
the first time I
Spivey
watched it.
Point, a small clipper
The
ship
21st of
drew
April.
toward land.
This is a
Suddenly,
great. Oh, Jesus
the
Christ!
night
That zoom is so cool.
rolled in.
I don't know why they did that. To try and
I
jump
don't know
scare you?
what that
Foot
effect
ahead
is
of them.
necessarily called either.
And then they saw a light. The ship crashed against the rocks. The wreckage sank. At the bottom of the sea lay the
bottom of the
Elizabeth
sea.
Dane with her crew, their lungs
Little flare of
filled
the
with
music.
salt water.
Mhm.
And above, as suddenly as it had come, the fog lifted, receded back across the ocean, and never came again.
Now,
I mean-
there is a little more to that. We have to worry about copyright issues, and that clip is like
Yeah,
3.5
the music.
minutes long. So I kind of cut it down to about a minute, but I think it gets the gist across about what this movie is. And I think that that's just a fantastic opening scene to
It's
a
a cool
movie. Just in
framing
general.
device as well, because we all, a movie is just a story, and the setting of a spooky campfire story is perfect.
Yeah, it was great, and I love like the slow crawl in on the clock, only to have it then snapped closed suddenly. And the big selling point on this movie of why I think it could potentially become one of my favorite horror movies ever is not only did I love it, but it's set on my birthday,
That's true. Yeah.
which I loved.
Yep.
Christian, what'd you think about the opening scene? I know that was one that you were a pretty big fan of.
I loved it. I would say it's up there with like my top 10 favorite opening shots, maybe, or opening scenes. It just like it was very simple, nothing over the top. I didn't even gather a lot of the details of what he was talking about. And I'm sure with the second watch, there's a lot more stuff that would connect, but I was immediately hooked, and I was like, I wish I was there listening to this story. But yeah, when we heard April 21st, we were all just like distracted, and we're like, hey, that's your birthday, and we completely missed
Yeah,
him
we were
laying
just-
out like the entire foreshadowing of the movie.
Yeah. Yeah. And after like I cut it off, he does say but some sailors say like 100 years after that event, the fog will return, basically is what he says. Cause I think they saw the light and it ended up just being like a campfire. And that's why the ship ran aground. Which I think is not exactly correct, which you find out later in the movie. But it's a great way to open a movie for sure. Like that was probably one of my favorite opening scenes that I've seen in probably any movie for the most part. Like it was just very captivating, and whatever that like crash zoom thing is that they do was wild.
I am curious if they did that because there was some issue with the film, or because they wanted it to create a jump scare, or because they wanted it to be a close up on him, but they only had one wide shot.
I don't know. I
So
feel
they
like
combined it into a.
I feel like maybe they just did it because they thought it would be cool, and it kind of added some drama to the opening.
Yeah.
Other than
Like,
just
keep in
him
mind-
sitting there.
Keep in mind, you're watching this in 1980 when
Yeah.
most of like the camera work lexicon has not even been attempted yet. And we
Yeah.
noticed that there's a lot of shots in this, especially the one that's like parallel tracking them as they're walking.
Mhm.
Yeah, I remember you
Oh.
pointed that out.
Yeah, that wasn't in anything at the time. Like that I would say until like the 2010s, that was not super popular in movies.
Yeah. I mean, I also thought it was like a really cool deal because they could have easily, just cut from the wide to a tight shot of him, but like it adds so much more like intrigue to your eye. Like what just happened when you're sitting there watching it? Because it's dark. And I mean, that's really the only thing in frame is his face. I don't know. I just thought it was like a really cool shot. And I don't know when I've ever seen that in another movie.
Now, something interesting is the guy who's the cinematographer on this. His name is Dean Cundy.
Mhm.
He made a few movies, but he got really popular when he made Halloween with John Carpenter.
Yeah.
And Halloween featured some of the first big Steadicam shots in a movie. Like at the beginning, haven't you watched it, Ryan?
I've seen it with you. Yeah.
You know, the beginning, like the POV shots and how they move the camera around. That was sort of
like outside the house. Is that what you're talking about?
You couldn't really do that stuff very easily until the creation of the Steadicam system.
That's really cool.
So that guy Dean Cundey did Halloween. He did this movie. And then after the successes of these movies with John Carpenter, which he still made several movies with him after this, but he then got to do Back to the Future and then the other two Back to the Futures. And then he did Jurassic Park. And he went on to do several other big and small movies.
Wow.
That's
an impressive resume.
You know,
that's a very impressive
resume. Right? Because like Christian was pointing out, you could tell like they would, he wasn't just phoning it in. Even for a movie like this, that's, not that big of a deal. It's a very simple movie. He's doing every sort of trick and interesting thing he can with the camera. Yeah.
Well, and one thing that I have in my notes for the movie is John Carpenter. Like, this is a pretty low budget movie. But John Carpenter wanted it to feel big budget, so they ended up shooting the whole thing in like anamorphic film at 2.35 to 1. And like people look back on that now and are like, they like praise John Carpenter for making that decision because it just made like the atmosphere and the look of the movie so much cooler than without being that.
Yeah, yeah, and that wasn't a big thing at the time.
Yeah,
it was 10 years before that, but not many people were doing it in 1980.
Definitely.
And it made it look cool.
Yeah.
And it makes it look especially cool today because it looks somehow older and classic, but it also looks new and sort of fresh with that ratio and the anamorphic, which again, the whole thing with anamorphic is it can make a small space and not a very cool space look cinematic.
Yeah.
I don't know how it does that in your brain through the technology, but it does. It'll take a normal room and like widen it and make it look cooler. Yeah,
the anamorphic lenses are pretty cool. But for those of you that have either not watched The Fog or have not looked into it very much, The Fog is a John Carpenter movie. He also did Halloween, and it was released on February 1st, 1980 with a budget of $1.1 million, and it had a box office of $21.3 million. Rotten Tomatoes has it at a 75% critic score and a 65% audience score. It's a 6.8 out of 10 on IMDb, and it's a 3.5 out of 5 on Letterboxd. So I don't know how I feel about a horror movie like this being released on February 1st. That seems like an odd time to release a horror movie.
Well, I have a fact.
Okay.
I looked up what other movies were in theaters at the time that this was released, and it also shared theater space with the Jaws 2 re-release.
Interesting.
So if you wanted to scare yourself, so if you wanted to scare yourself out of going to the ocean, like February 1980 would have been a really good time.
You could have a double feature.
Going to the theaters,
You can't go above water or below.
Or on land next to water, because the fog's going to be there too.
That's true. So I have a description from Prime Video, and I also have a description for IMDb of the movie because I kind of liked it a little better than Prime Video. But Prime Video,
are we going to judge this, right?
Yes,
what is this segment called?
This is I don't know. I don't know. We don't have a name for it.
Where we look at streaming service descriptions and see if it's funny or not, if it makes sense, basically.
Yeah. So the description for this movie on Prime Video is 100 years after their ship was deliberately wrecked, the ghosts of the murdered seamen have returned to Antonio Bay to exact a ghastly vengeance. That's why I did not like this.
Spoiler.
The description on IMDb is an unearthly fog rolls into a small coastal town exactly 100 years after a ship mysteriously sank in its waters.
Way better description.
I read the Prime Video one and was like, well, just go ahead and tell everyone what happens.
Yeah. Which, that doesn't mess up the movie, but it's kind of like...
No, but...
It's right in the description as if you'd already seen it.
Yeah.
But that's not what you want a description to be. You want it to be
it's
very vague.
Supposed to, have some intrigue to it, not be like, oh, okay, well, this is what exactly happens. Like, the whole deal about it being called The Fog is like, oh, what's the deal with the fog? Like, is there something in it? Like,
what's the deal with the fog?
What's the deal with the fog?
Was that Hank Hill?
No, mine was supposed to be Jerry Seinfeld, but it also sort of sounded like Hank Hill.
I don't know what mine was. I was just copying Braxton.
What's the deal?
What's the deal with the fog?
Well, that John Carpenter, he's messed up, I tell you what. Thinking of all those sorts of spooky and scary things. I don't know what's up with that boy. He ain't right. Okay. Do you think the fog would create a Hank Hill impression? But Christian, what would your? Because what did we call the thing that you make up?
Oh, it's just Christian's descriptions are fantastic.
Yeah, but it's like
is what the whole deal is. I don't know. We have a segment to it.
Yeah, but it's like what that. It's accurate, but it's also not.
Yeah, I don't know. It's accurate to a very specific audience, I feel like.
He has a wife and he flies around. That's the name of the...
Like, that is sort of what happens in Oblivion.
In the movie Oblivion.
Yeah. Do you have one just off the dome for this? I feel like we need to make this a permanent segment so he's prepared whenever he
that's
shows
true,
up for it.
I know I said it's just when you take a comedic look at the plot and you're like, well, no, that is what actually happened.
That's true. Yeah.
There's woman abandons her child to work in late night radio.
Yeah, basically. That's
the movie.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
I mean, you're not wrong. You're not wrong. So The Fog was nominated for Best Horror Film and Best Special Effects at the 1981 Academy of Science Fiction, Fantasy, and Horror Films Awards. John Carpenter scored the movie, much like he did for Halloween. And I think that maybe that's kind of one of the main reasons why John Carpenter films feel that the way that they do. He's in charge of everything. He's in charge of the visuals. He's in charge of the writing. He's in charge of the sound and the score. And I feel like maybe that's part of the magic of John Carpenter movies, is that he just, has his hand in everything and he makes the movie he wants.
Yeah.
I mean, that can be said for Halloween as well. I mean, his movies are pretty loved in the horror.
Yeah. And even this movie, we'll probably get into this a little more later, but even in this movie, like after he shot it and was looking at it, he was like, he could tell it wasn't perfect. He could tell it wasn't exactly the movie that he wanted to make.
Yeah.
So they did reshoots and it turns out okay, but he still thinks, it's not, in his opinion, it's not that great because it's not the exact vision that he had.
Like, but even in the end, after reshoots and stuff?
Yeah, he still never really was satisfied with it, I guess you could say. He wasn't satisfied with what he made.
Okay. I didn't read that. Again, I did read some other stuff, but
that's interesting because, having someone with the singular vision, it does prove its merit because this movie is still very good and it has some great, great stuff about it.
Yeah.
But it's interesting that even in that case, where, you can't say having someone with the singular vision will always create, the perfect movie. Because it's not. Even he says,
oh, yeah.
Hey, I had the power to make this anything I wanted, and I still couldn't get it quite right, in my opinion.
Yeah.
So I think that's kind of an interesting...
Well, and maybe that's why this one isn't quite as loved as Halloween. I mean, they've got sort of a similar vibe going on. Mm-hmm. And I think maybe part of the problem was that he was trying to go for a PG rating for this movie. And it got an R. And that's why there's a lack of, like gore, blood, all that kind of stuff when people are getting killed. I don't know if maybe that had something to do with it as well. I also think one of the really good things about this, maybe even one of the best things about this one, is that it's only an hour and a half, which, I mean, I like longer movies, but this one, like, nothing felt drug out. The movie never really lulled. It never dropped its pacing. And it was originally cut for 80 minutes. John Carpenter had to add some scenes because he didn't feel like that was long enough for a feature, and he wasn't super happy with it, like Braxton said just a moment ago. And so those ended up actually being about a third of the movie when all was said and done. And the added scenes include the prologue, which we just watched a moment ago with the elderly captain telling ghost stories around a campfire, which I thought was pretty interesting. I don't know what the opening would have been before.
You know what I bet it would have been? I bet the opening before would have been the little boy finding the plank.
Oh, you think so?
And then
that's
the
just
music
where they
comes
would have
in.
kicked it off.
Because that felt like it almost really was the beginning of the movie, even though 10 minutes had already passed.
That's true. I didn't think about that.
I think every movie should have an old guy around a campfire and open up like
I
that.
think that would help.
I'm not opposed to that by any means.
What would be the craziest movie to have that at the beginning of it?
I mean, Oblivion would be pretty crazy to have. that was just on the brain. After,
Sonic the Hedgehog 3. That puts me in mind of a tale about a blue creature.
Yeah, I mean, it'd be pretty good for a bunch of funny stuff.
Yeah.
Off the top of my head, the craziest one I could probably think of is like The Pursuit of Happiness, where there's just like an old guy's like
serious drama.
It's just like old Will Smith sitting at a campfire telling everyone about his pursuit for happiness.
I like the idea.
Oh my god! And they have to say the title of the movie. They have to say, you know what I mean?
Absolutely.
These places where dinosaurs were roaming, a place called Jurassic Park.
Jurassic Park. So I don't know if you guys looked up too much about this movie, but this idea actually like came from a sort of real thing that happened in history. At the time, Deborah Hill and John Carpenter were dating, which seems crazy because he's actually married.
Producer, I think.
Yes, but he's actually married to Adrienne Barbeau, who's the lead actress at the time that they were filming and actually made the movie. But apparently they were in England visiting Stonehenge and they saw a fog bank just sitting on the water in the distance. And Carpenter told her, what if there was something in the fog? And then he like brought that along and added a real life story of a ship loaded down with gold that sunk off the coast of California, which I thought was kind of cool. He actually talks about this in the Blu-ray commentary, that there was a deliberate wrecking of a clipper ship, the deliberate wrecking of the clipper ship in the movie, and it's being plundered, sunk. Everyone dies. It was based on an actual event, which is the wrecking of a ship called the Frolic, and that took place in the 19th century near Goleta, California. Kind of cool.
Interesting.
So there is some like real history of sorts attributed to this, and I think now's a good time. Christian, how historically accurate was this movie, man?
Well, the one qualm that I have about this movie that I feel like would have made it better is if it took place in the Northeast instead of California.
Yeah. I think you said something about that too while we were watching the movie.
Because the California setting is interesting, and there is history there, but it would all tie together and make sort of a neater presentation if it's what you're saying.
Yeah. So a lot of stuff actually checks out, and I don't know if Carpenter knew this, but there is actually a lot of maritime lore about fog. There's even something now that this one guy who had an experience with something in the Bermuda Triangle has dubbed electronic fog. It's like this weird tinted fog that pilots and sailors have described going through that messes with their electronics. And
do they like describe? What do you mean by tinted?
Like lit, like self-illuminated.
Oh,
that's kind of what it is in this movie.
Kind of like this.
It's very similar to this movie. And so I was thinking like, well, I know of a lot of stories about electronic fog and self-illuminated fog that have come out of the Caribbean. could a lot of this possibly have been inspired by this movie? I think so, or at least like it helped popularize that kind of area of folklore of once you get out on the water, like it's really scary. There's a lot of unknowns. But yeah, there was this one guy in the Bermuda Triangle that was trying to fly from Bahamas to Florida, and he went through this fog. Everything on his plane stopped working, and then he arrived like an hour before what was theoretically, like physically possible for his airplane. And so if it's accurate when he took off and when he landed, like a lot of people speculate that there's time distortion within fog in certain locations that may have magnetic anomalies on the Earth, and that this like illuminated fog may have something to do with it. So there is actually a lot. It's not something that is just in this movie. Like all over the world, there's a lot of folklore about fog. There's a very similar movie which takes place on land called The Mist, and it just is this idea of, you know, the scariest monsters are the ones that we can't see. And I think this movie is extra terrifying because you never get a good look at anything.
Yeah.
The monster,
and even when you do, it teases it out where you're like, is that what the...
Yeah. And so you can't see anything. You've just got guys like disappearing and dying, and you can only get glimpses. And so we never truly know what's in the fog. I thought it was awesome. I just think it would have lined up a lot more with northeastern kind of Boston, Maine, somewhere up there. Just because when they said California, I was like, that's kind of weird. Not that there was no maritime history there, but like a lot of the stories that I think about take place on the Northeast coast. And it was accurate that people did quite often use fires and try to wreck ships. And that was actually a way that people engaged in piracy back in the day. It's theorized that Aaron Burr's daughter, Theodosia, who was on a ship called the Patriot in 1813, went missing, like completely vanished. One of the theories for what happened to her was that they were run aground by people creating fires on one of the barrier islands, who then just scuttled the ship and took everything.
Purposely trying to bring in the ship to shore and then just steal all of its valuables. And
Interesting. I hadn't heard that before. They didn't include that in Hamilton.
They did not.
You can call me Aaron Burr, by the way. I'm dropping Hamilton's. Isn't that a Lonely Island song?
I don't know.
It sounds like a Lonely Island verse, even if it might not be.
She also, side story, may be buried on Bolivar Peninsula, opposite Galveston.
Oh, really?
Yep. There's some local kind of folk tales that in the when would this have been? This would have been like 1860s or 70s. But apparently there's a guy come forward who was a member of Dominique Yu's crew. If you're familiar with who Dominique Yu is, he was a captain under the Lafitte's in both New Orleans and Galveston. He was a former cannoneer under Napoleon, and then he commanded several ships under them. But one of his crew members later confessed, saying it was Dominique Yu that took him. We brought her back to Texas, and she didn't survive the trip. She's buried near Galveston. So that's one of those weird stories that came out. But it was a real thing that they would get people to run aground. I wish I knew exactly when and where, but I know in Matagorda Bay there was a story to where it was like one of the first guys hanged in Texas for a crime. It was because he was found guilty of lighting these giant fires and making ships run aground.
Dang.
Interesting. You want to take a look quickly at one of my favorite scenes, if not my favorite scene from the movie, and it features actress Adrienne Barbeau And her role as Stevie Wayne, who we will see pretty prominently in this clip, was actually written specifically for her because she was married to John Carpenter at the time that the movie was made and released. So let's take a look at that clip.
Ahoy, mateys. This is KAB Antonio Bay. Stevie Wayne here, beaming a signal across the sea.
I'm pretty sure when she said that, when we were watching, he went, oh.
Yeah.
Warm hello, and keep a watch out for that fog bank heading in from the east. Now, in the meantime, relax with me while I play this song from the Coupe de Villes, dedicated just to you.
Boy, would I like to meet her.
I saw her at a grocery store one day.
Yeah?
You would like to meet her.
She's crazy. There's no fog bank out there.
There's no fog bank out there.
Perfect delivery.
Little League with my kid brother.
She's a mother?
I thought you were happily married.
Not that happy.
Fog bank out there.
Who was he talking to?
I don't know, but I love this guy.
Hey, there's a fog bank out there.
Okay. I could talk about why this scene works comedically for hours. It's got the rule of threes.
You have the floor.
The third one is broken.
Yep.
It's the fact that the first time he says it like he's a cartoon character. Like
She's crazy. There
I'm pretty
ain't
sure
no
this
fog bank
actor
out there.
it famously played bums in like 10 movies.
Oh,
in Back to
really?
the Future, he's the bum who, like, after
I haven't
Marty
seen Back to the Future.
crashes into the thing, he's like, "You crazy drunk driver." He says it in the same weird way. He always plays like a drunk hobo. And the way he delivers this line like that.
Like a drunk hobo. Well, I think he's supposed to be a drunk sailor at this point.
Right, exactly. But the funny thing is that when he actually sees the fog bank, it's almost like he drops the drunk sailor character and delivers it like a normal man.
Hey.
It's like, hey, there is a fog bank.
There's a fog bank. I loved not the first one's great. The shoot crazy. There ain't no fog bank out there. I love the just fog bank out there.
Yeah, right. And he says that even with more of like a drawl, like fog bank out there.
Yeah.
He might as well be just going. Wah.
He says it like jokingly, like fog bank out there. Yeah, yeah, totally. And then he just, hey, there's a fog bank out there.
And I also heard a synthesizer going, whoa, that wasn't there before.
Yeah, that's just a great scene, man.
Really good.
And it got a laugh out of all of us.
Yes, it did.
That's pretty impressive.
Yeah.
And we didn't know we were watching a horror comedy.
No.
I know, especially for 1980, like that would have been the top joke at the time.
Oh,
yeah.
For sure.
That
we
to
would
the
have walked
80s
around for months.
Is what made her. He did what in his cup was to the 2000s.
Yep. If we had watched that in 1980, we would have walked around for months just going fog bank out there. In fact, we might go around for months now after we've seen
If I see fog, I'm going to text y'all and be like,
ain't no fog bank out
fog
there.
bank out there.
Fog bank out there.
Rasm, frasm, rattin. That's that guy. It's the same guy who does that. It's the same guy who says rasm, frettin, rattin when he's like under his breath cursing.
The truck driver from SpongeBob?
No. Yes, I guess.
Who are you talking about?
Lots of people that go rasm, frasm, rattin under their breath.
No.
Ain't no fog bank out there.
Ain't no fog bank out there. It's just a great scene, man. It's a great scene. I would watch the movie again just for that scene. I'll put it that way.
Also, which we're not able to hear a lot of it in these clips, but the music is what makes this and most of John Carpenter's stuff really, really good. We talked about it when there's the beginning scene when the kid picks up the board, and then essentially I think he's running back to the house and he goes to like a wide shot or something, and then like the main theme like begins.
Yeah, and the main theme goes hard.
Yeah, and you're like you're immediately like, because you see what's happening visually and you're interested in it, And then when the music kicks in, what I like about his style and his music is it's not overbearing, but it literally goes what the visuals you're seeing and what you're feeling about the movie. It immediately like kicks in, not to like subvert it, but to be like to double down. Like whatever you were thinking and feeling before, it's like it increases that feeling like 10 times.
Yeah, I agree with that.
The sort of vibe that you're supposed to be feeling.
Yeah. I can just picture John Carpenter as he's like sitting there thinking about scoring a movie, and he's just, you know, sitting in like, but he's probably just like sitting in like his back room at his house, and he's just got like a room full of synthesizers.
Yeah.
Because that's all that his stuff is most of the time is just synths.
Yes.
And he's just out there like jamming.
Yeah.
And I could picture like his wife or somebody walking in like, what the frick is going on?
Yeah.
And he's like, oh, it's for the new movie, The Fog. It's for the new movie, The Fog.
You know what John Carpenter looks like, right?
I do. Yes.
He has a great look.
He does.
As a young man and as an old man, he has an amazing look.
I don't know what I saw, if I've seen him young. I've seen him today at 79 years old. He looks like he's been through it.
Yeah. Yes.
He looks like he's been through it. There was a clip that I actually almost cut together for this of him going through, which I don't know if this is on like a special features thing on like a Blu-ray, DVD, commentary, whatever. He's sitting in front of like a small TV and breaking down like scene by scene what's going on. He's like, yeah, this is a VFX shot. Like all the fog was added in post in this, and like this whole thing on the beach, like that was VFX. And he's got some like, he's just going through it, like just scene by scene as the movie's going. And he looks like he got electrocuted. Like, he's sitting there with all his white hair and it's everywhere.
Yeah.
And I'm like,
and he knew he was going to be on camera that day.
He was filming on something that day. Yeah. He just like, I don't know.
That's what I do like that.
He didn't care, man. He's unapologetically himself.
Yeah.
Unapologetically himself. Speaking of The Fog, not the movie, but the actual fog in the movie. The fog machines apparently were specifically designed for use on this movie, and they used a combination of dry ice, fog juice, whatever the heck fog juice is, and they used some optical effects as well to make the fog. Because there were times during that where I was like, I don't know what they're using, but that's the thickest fog I've ever seen.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
In fact, I think my Letterboxd review of this movie, here, let me pull it up before I misquote myself.
It looks to me here like the reviews that you said, dang, this fog is thick. Yo.
I said, pretty sure they bought every fog machine ever made for this.
Yeah. No, it turns out they just made their own industrial strength fog machines.
Guess so.
Yeah.
I guess so. You know, if you call the movie The Fog, you got to have lots of fog.
Yeah. And it looks
good.
Sometimes you could tell it was optical, but it's still because it's meant to be otherworldly. It still works. You know what I mean?
Yeah, it was really cool. It was really cool. One of my favorite parts of the movie too was just like the character of Stevie Wayne and like having a radio station that she's operating from a lighthouse that she owns.
I want that job.
Right?
I would live that life. I would be a radio DJ in a lighthouse.
So apparently John Carpenter loosely based the character on Nightbird. I think her actual name was Allison Steele. She was the night shift DJ of the radio station WNEW-FM in New York City. And she had her own popular radio show from 1968 to 1979. I answered my own question. She entertained listeners with mellow DJ patter peppered with poetry and mysticism.
Interesting.
I would say that was pretty spot on. And the lighthouse that they're in is super cool. And I actually have a clip, like a little BTS sort of some locations from this movie, including the lighthouse. Now, they don't go in the lighthouse, but the number of steps to this lighthouse is like 400 and something, I'm pretty sure. Is what I read.
Because even in the movie, you can kind of see some of that.
Yeah. So let's take a look at that.
Well, anyway, it's a little bit of a walk to the lighthouse from the parking lot. It's about a 15-minute walk. And in windy conditions like
Of course.
this,
So cool.
where it's freezing ass cold, ain't exactly fun. Especially if you're an idiot who wore shorts.
I love this little like pan down
But
to
how
show
awesome
his
is that? That's
shorts.
the
That's
opening
great.
shot.
It's so good.
Just the opening shot of the fog. Actually, all the stuff in the foreground, you see the trees and stuff, as it pans up, those were actually faked. That was put in the foreground
It's really cool.
of the shot. to
I
make it
had
look
no
like
idea
trees
that
and
that was
stuff.
faked. I figured that was
So
some
this
more
is
real.
the area where
That's
Adrian
awesome.
Barbeau pulls up in her car, parks here, gets out, and then heads towards the lighthouse.
Yeah, because I guarantee they only show like
So
part
we've
of her
made the
walk.
long trek up here to Point Reyes Station,
Probably.
the lighthouse right below.
Look at these
And
steps,
unfortunately,
man.
they will not let anybody walk down
Look
the
at
stairs
the
down to
steps.
the lighthouse. So this is as close as we're going to get today.
That's
Due
so
to high
many
winds,
steps.
can you believe it? I think they're just being touchy.
That was a good gag.
Can you believe how many steps there are going down to that lighthouse? Can you imagine having to walk that many steps every day, twice a day?
You know what? Whatever I said about being a DJ in a lighthouse,
I take it back.
Take it back.
I take it back. Ain't nobody got time for that.
I feel like it would
the
always
part-
be quicker to take it like a dinghy over to the cliff and then climb a ladder up to the lighthouse.
Oh, probably.
Then to
But the
walk-
problem is, the problem would be is this if it's like really stormy out.
Yeah, and the
Like you
water
could
is
still walk
probably
up the
always
stairs.
rough. Yeah,
You would not want to get on a dinghy
Yeah,
if the
quit playing with your
freaking
dinghy.
waves are crashing into the cliff. That would not be fun. That's how you die.
but
She'd
no,
be
I
like
that.
signing off, and then they would read her obituary.
Yeah. Oh, that's crazy about the opening shot. That's why I don't know. That's why movies are freaking cool. They're
Yeah.
cool because
Yeah.
he took the real shot, which is a beautiful shot there of the beach, and combined it with a fake thing
Yeah,
in
and
the
something
foreground to make
that
it
looked
look even more awesome.
Creepy.
Yeah.
It just made it look creepy.
Yep.
Because a shot of the beach at night, like it's cool.
Right.
But
Tranquil
is it
even.
spooky. Also, I cut out. I don't remember if it was in there or not. Actually, it may have been at the end of the first clip with the opening scene. But the end of the opening scene is so cool because it goes from his face, like the old captain guy, and then it just slowly creeps up into the darkness,
And you think it's
and then
fading
it
to black.
continues to creep up into that shot
Mhm.
of the beach with like the foreground, and you get John Carpenter's The Fog in some freaking cool type face.
The font is perfect. We talked about, I think I said that when
So
we watched it.
cool.
I was like, oh, he's great with fonts. I was like, what am I saying? But it's true. Like he picks cool, like
He's
do
a
we have
font
that in
genius.
movies today? Like, do people even think about like picking a cool like typeface for
No, they're like Montserrat.
yeah, I get, or if you're James Cameron, you're like, make an avatar, papyrus.
Is that what he uses?
For the first movie, it was some variation of, well, like in the first movie, there's like the subtitles for the Na'vi language.
Mm-hmm.
All those subtitles are in papyrus, which once you notice that, it's hard to not notice it.
Okay, I'm gonna have to look at that next time.
Mhm.
Thanks for ruining the movie for me. Papyrus is a terrible font.
Well, I
I'll
think
just
it's
throw that
it's
out
an
there.
okay
And
font for what it is.
It has a use case, but that use case is very slim.
In the PowerPoint that I made in 4th grade about Egypt, that was its usage. Didn't everybody have to do that? Did you have to make a presentation about Egypt in 4th grade? I'm just gonna say yeah.
Maybe. I know I had to do one in GT one time because I made a sphinx out of sugar cubes. That was freaking sick.
Yeah, I made a model of the pyramid.
I made a sphinx. You know how hard it was to make a sphinx out of sugar cubes? I think we ended up using like a Dremel and like grinding them down
Mhm.
to where they were like curved at the top. It ended up turning out really good. But you also had to like stick them together. And then you had to try to make it to school the next day with it all intact, which was like a chore because you're in elementary school. Keep in mind, you're like 10 years old, maybe. Tough times we lived in.
I saw that there was the clip of the fog first kill. Is that the one where you see the ship?
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Yeah.
Can we
take a look at that one?
Yeah. I think this is it's my either first or second favorite scene.
Who's there?
Oh, this scene's... It's so good.
And you second guess yourself if you see something, just like the characters do.
Just like the subtlety of like
the way they play with the
a shadowy figure in the fog.
And then there's more behind
so
them
good.
That you couldn't see before.
Also, I'm pretty sure that sound made me jump the first time we watched it. It was just so loud compared to how everything else was.
Yeah. There's a lot of gooey pushing down of the various.
Now, I will say I don't understand. I don't exactly understand why they have swords and hooks for hands and that kind of stuff, because the whole deal is that it's like the lepers that they did not want in the town, and so they sent them out on a ship and then like sunk the ship. Basically, they like lit it on fire or something. I thought is what they said, and towards the end, whenever they actually kind of reveal like what happened 100 years before.
Which that's what's interesting is the movie is. I mean, we can have this discussion now. The movie is never clear. It never states that they're pirates.
Yeah.
However, they do have gold and lots of gold, enough that the townspeople were jealous and greedy of it. So that makes you think, well, maybe they were, they some of them had leprosy and essentially they became a leper camp.
Yeah.
But it makes you question, were they pirates before that? Because how else would they have that large of a hoard of gold that would make another town, the next town over, jealous of it?
Yeah, because I mean, and we'll look at this clip in a minute of the end scene, but they have enough gold. They melted it down into a gigantic cross.
Yeah,
which you know how much gold it takes to make a gigantic cross of gold?
Yeah.
Holy mess, man. That's so much gold.
Yeah.
But yeah, it never like comes out and says, yes, they were pirates. No, they weren't pirates.
Right.
It leads you to believe they were not, sort of, I would say.
Right. By the end, it makes you kind of think that they're not.
But if you don't know and you watch this movie and you look at them and what they are wearing and what they are killing with, they're pirates.
Yeah.
100%.
I think it's safe to say they're ghost pirates, right?
I mean,
if there was ever a ghost pirate in a movie, it's these guys.
If you Google
ghost
what about the fog has to do with pirates, that's the first thing is it's like, oh, they're ghost pirates.
Right.
That's basically Google's answer.
Yeah. And even if they're not, they're essentially the closest thing on film that we're ever going to get to them until someone makes the actual ghost pirate movie.
Is there a ghost pirate movie?
I don't know. Probably on like sci-fi, maybe.
Well, and I mean,
that's like a sci-fi movie, Christian. Ghost pirates.
That probably is one.
Or it's a Tubi movie.
A Tubi, yeah. I'd watch that on Tubi.
I mean, technically, I guess you sort of have ghosts because isn't Barbossa's crew in Pirates?
In some ways, yes, they're ghosts, but they're more undead.
Which would be a zombie.
But they are sort of like. It's all semantics. It's all ghost semantics.
Okay.
I would say, okay. I am crafting my official response.
Right.
Hold on.
Right. Your argument as to what they are.
Yeah.
I would argue
why.
that it is such a gray area and that it ultimately does not matter. However, we should include it as a pirate movie because there are themes. And I think pirate is one of the biggest misnomers out there, not only just like the privateer pirate argument, but when somebody finds a ship, an old wooden ship, what do they call it? They don't call it an old 18th century ship, they call it a pirate ship.
Oh, a pirate ship. Yeah.
And so
you're right.
I think it's just caught up in a bunch of maritime lore and we associate them with pirates. It's like how not every outlaw was a train robber. We don't see, there's not a certain person or a certain group mentioned or the act of piracy that puts them with pirates. In fact, like multiple times in the movie, they talk about them as like just a fishing crew. We see some of their gear, like
as
meat
just
hooks.
sailors,
and so we're like, okay, so these are just sailors that have developed a curse. They're undead. But I think in like the greater lexicon, people are just going to see them as pirates and something identifiable.
Right. Because the hook that they have is not a hook hand. Actually, it's a tool, right?
Yeah, it's a meat
you
hook.
See him holding the handle.
Yeah, it would have hung
with the hook on it.
Yeah, they probably used it to hook gills of tuna and stuff and pull it on board.
Mm-hmm.
But it made a good weapon, so they just
yeah, right. Gutting and catching a fish is a very scary.
Is that kind of use why that? Like a hook for a hand is associated with like pirates or something like that, is that they would just use something like a hook that they were, using for fish or to hang meat or whatever.
I would say you would definitely have to be resourceful. I'm not sure of any specific instances, but if you're involved in a lot of naval battles, there is a lot of cannon fire coming your way that's splintering, probably taking off fingers, hands, and legs. And so it's not like you can just go to a hospital and learn how to recover. Like if you survive infection and survive the injury, you're probably going to have to resort to something very resourceful right there. Like something that you can find on the ship. You're going to have to make yourself useful.
Yeah. We've seen like a ball on a chain for a hand.
And I will say that
is the hook like the most popular one because it was actually useful where you could like, pick things up or like you could just stab it into an apple and eat that or something like that.
I would say so. Like with the technology at the time, it probably gave you the most. And we really underestimate a lot of the technology that they had because they definitely had various forms of prosthetic hands at the time. I mean, they had wonderful inventors and they would have been in and out of port cities with doctors and people who may have been able to develop stuff. Not that they like would have been able to control with nerves, but possibly something with string where they could have gotten some sort of gripping ability back. And I will say what makes this movie good and what makes a lot of horror movies good is that they take an object that maybe we use it in everyday life, but it's not seen as a weapon.
It's a normal object.
And the movie figures out how to turn it into like something that we are terrified of. But like horror movies have done this, whether it's a chainsaw, like that was prior to the Texas Chainsaw Massacre.
Just a chainsaw.
Like how many people and a few other horror movies, like how many people would have thought of a chainsaw? Now would have related that to horror, or how many people would have related this meat hook with horror? How many people would have related like an ice pick? And so I think one thing that this movie, part of what probably gave it that cultural push and made it so successful at the time was that it like completely reimagined the meat hook. I think that's an overlooked aspect of this.
Was this in, I don't necessarily remember like a hook necessarily from any of the earlier movies that we watched, like Treasure Island.
Not really.
Captain Blood, Captain Kidd. Like
I think that must be maybe a more recent creation. You know what I mean? Or it was rolled into the myth more recently than maybe some of this other stuff, you know, because Peg Legs, for example, was in Treasure Island. And I think Peg Legs are much more realistic and were probably way more common. And then a hook for a hand is maybe more a fantastical element that we have added to it more recently. But I don't know where the root of that came from. You know what I mean? Why that?
Yeah.
And why, you know, why did my pirate Lego figures from the 90s automatically come with a Lego pirate hook hand?
I don't know. Maybe that's something that we should find out at some point.
That it should be there.
Okay, this is interesting. So I Googled it up, and it says, I just said that really weird. I'm sorry.
Google it up, man.
On the line.
We're all
so the hook hand did not actually become popular as a prosthetic until 1912, when this Dr. David W. Dorrance came up with a design that allowed amputees to hold and squeeze
like the modern
objects.
version of the little grabbing thing.
Yeah, probably.
The first
reacher thing. You could reach.
No,
what
are
you talking about?
I'm talking about on like prosthetics from like the 70s was like a 2-prong thing that could grab.
Yeah.
Oh,
that might be the first version of that.
There's no evidence at all used to support that pirates specifically or sailors ever had hook hands, and partially because they were typically lower class. Usually, the laboring inland classes were the ones that used that had the capabilities of getting prosthetics. But sailors, if they were to lose their limbs or eyes in an accident, I guess this is including eye patches as well, the most common injury for sailors was cargo shifting. Not necessarily bullets, splintering wood, shifting cargo.
It was just stuff they had on the ship, and it smashed into them. God, interesting. That's crazy. Wow.
Or just like, oh yeah, I got this cut on my leg. I sure hope nothing happens to it. Cut to like 2 weeks later, and like the infection made it like fall off.
Yeah,
because they didn't have basic understanding of how to clean an infection.
There is, however, so there's a blog post from 2014 that I need to read through, where a guy is talking about what pirates did before OSHA regulations, and he actually does have some examples of possible prosthetics.
OSHA regulations.
Good one. I knew that was coming.
Okay. We can talk about that next time.
OSHA.
That's so funny.
Oh my god.
Oh my goodness. Okay, so we do have another clip that I would like to look at. And this is an interview that Shout Factory did, because they put out like a Blu-ray release and a 4K release of this movie, and so it's got a bunch of like bonus features that they did. So this is not like Jamie Lee Curtis at the time the movie was filmed. This is her like reminiscing on her character in The Fog.
Yeah, and
it's pretty interesting. So let's take a look at that.
Okay.
It's funny. I watched The Fog before I did this interview. I hadn't seen it in a long, long time. And I forgot that she jumps into bed with him very quickly. And it's pretty chaste. It's hardly, gratuitous on any level. I mean, Tommy's wearing a tank top. Yes, I'm assuming on some level it was nice to be playing this kind of rebellious rich girl who's hitchhiking her way around with a strange man in a strange town during a strange circumstance. Yeah, I think it felt good. The wardrobe was much more to my liking, that it jived much more with me. Not that I was jumping into bed with people, but you know what I'm saying. It certainly felt a little more contemporary, and it was good. I liked it.
Not that I was, jumping into bed with people.
Yeah.
But it vibed with me.
She's great.
She is. And I think she says, like, maybe at the beginning of this clip, because I kind of cut a little bit off the beginning. She says, I think she was having a hard time finding work, which I would guess would be after Halloween, because Halloween was one of her earlier movies, if I'm remembering correctly.
I think it was her first movie.
And it was her first movie. Well, she was having trouble finding work, I think. And so John Carpenter was like, hey, like, I'll write you in, like, come do another movie with me. So he like wrote this character specifically for her. And like when you first see her in the movie, you're kind of like, oh, is that Jamie Lee Curtis? Because she looks kind of different. And you're like, okay, well, she's not going to be around very long. No, she's she's around the whole movie.
Yeah.
Also, I know it was different. It was a different time back then. But in what world at like midnight do you go and pick up someone
Think of a hitchhiker
with a thumb out on the side of the road?
Yeah.
Like, I don't know that hardly anybody picks up hitchhikers anyway nowadays.
Mm-hmm.
You definitely wouldn't do it at midnight on a back road in the dark.
Yeah.
That's
and
a
even
good
if
way
you
to
did
die.
do that, you wouldn't then drive home and sleep with that person.
That's also true.
Because that happens.
That is also true. Yeah, that was very shocking.
Yeah.
I will say. Whenever that whole sequence happens and it like cuts to them in bed, you're like, oh wow, that escalated very quickly.
Yeah.
Wow, they've known each other for like 10 minutes.
Yeah.
They were like, oh man, the window exploded out of the car.
Yeah. That really got me going.
Let's just go get it on. You know what I'm saying? Pretty great, if you ask me.
Yeah.
Pretty great. So this is the ending scene of the movie. And it's pretty chilling is how I would describe it.
Pretty chilly, yeah.
Pretty chilling. So let's take a look at that.
I love that it cuts back and they're there, and they weren't there a second ago.
See that? I want to make the same joke I did the first time I saw this, which is they're just standing there menacingly. Like every time.
Blake?
I've got your gold.
And the sound he makes when he walks, this guy.
The lighting too is just so good.
This is your goal, Blake.
Like the lights in the
My
fog
grandfather
and
stole it
stuff.
from you.
Eyes are so freaky, dude.
Yeah.
I'm the one who must dance
Good
for
Lord.
it.
Yeah, and the scene's kind of long and drawn out. And basically, like right after that in the movie, the ghost pirate grabs the cross and it starts glowing, which I still don't know how the frick they made that thing glow like that. But it's real darn cool, man.
Yeah.
It is darn cool.
But one of my favorite things about the movie is the end. Because in this, you know, the it starts glowing, and then basically they pull the priest away from the cross, and essentially he survives. And then they leave. All the weird stuff stops happening for now, and you think it's over.
Mm-hmm.
And then the final scene is him back at the church. He opens the door. They're not there. He looks back, and it's that same scene again where he's there in the fog in the central room.
And does he like want to die? Like he's like, why didn't they just take me with them?
Well, I think it's not that he wants to. It's that he kind of feels like maybe he deserves it. And he felt like that was sort of their whole, like that's why they were there, was to take him.
Well, and I think 5 die up to that point, and he gives them the gold back.
And he knew it was supposed to be 6 because that's what they said. But yeah, when he comes back, and it's because I think it's not even the other ghost; it's just the captain, right?
I think there may be 2 or 3 of them.
Yeah, there might be some in the back, but it looks slightly different. He's already up close to him, basically.
Yeah,
and he kind of accepts that this is his death, and then the captain guy slashes his sword, and then on the sword slash, it cuts to black, and then the end title card comes up, and then the music comes back in. And when I first saw it and I saw like that was the ending part, I was like, oh, like whatever stupid stuff and weird stuff was in this movie before, a good ending like that can absolve a movie of its sins. You know what I mean? It can make you leave going, that was nice.
It was
and it's
really
one
good.
of those endings where it's just satisfying and cool, and it works.
Yeah. Well, it doesn't leave anything like too open ended either. Like it pretty much just kind of, because it was like, oh, I guess they gave the gold back and now they don't need to kill a sixth person. And it was like, oh, well, actually they do.
Right.
They must
and that's
have
sort of, I
vengeance.
guess, some of the themes of the movie, right? Where it's, revenge and, you can't escape or bury the past sins of, and how the town is built on, this lie. All that stuff is sort of parts of the theme of the movie.
Yeah.
But yeah. But that scene also shows one of my favorite parts of this is the whole usage of light, right? The usage of light in the fog, the usage of the figures in the fog being dark, and you can see that they're detailed, but you can't quite tell. And I don't know, it's basically, and it's what makes a good movie. And it's why John Carpenter's movies and the horror movies that are very simple premises and even very simple shots, really. I mean, it's just a wide shot of people in a room. Okay. But what makes it good and interesting is they take their simple premise and their simple shot, and they do it literally like at 110%. They make it like perfect for what the scene needs.
Yeah.
And you see it, and it's what makes it cool.
Yeah. The lighting in it is fantastic. And that last scene like kind of really showcases it. You see throughout the movie, like I think even the scene with the ship really showcases some lighting as well. I know Christian was pretty big on the lighting. Did you want to talk about that?
Not beyond what he said. I thought it was perfect use of lighting where nothing was revealed to you. Like you saw just enough. I thought the use of space with the evil fisherman guys was also really cool too, because when you are first introduced to them, they're off in the distance, like just beyond what you can make out. And so they're in this kind of awkward space where a lot of movies would have just shown them in a jump scare, like,
right,
boom, we got you. To me, this one kind of like is aimed at the viewer's like fight or flight reflex, to where just
it's
like
almost your POV, where if you were on the other ship and looking, that's what they would look like.
And it makes you go in this position of like, if I were in this situation, would I fight? Would I run?
Right.
Is this a threat? Is this going to end up being just a friend standing there in the shadows, in the fog?
And your brain is trying to process all that.
I thought they did a really good job of that awkward use of space.
Cool. Braxton, you ready for some pirate bingo?
Yes.
I know this
will be a very short one.
Yeah.
Okay. And there's some we can debate as well. So there's a very slim pirate bingo. One of the ones on our pirate bingo is that they don't get to keep the treasure. Now, they were not seeking any treasure in this movie, but they do not get to keep the treasure. The heroes of the film, right?
Yeah. That one's tough.
That's a stretch, so I'm not even sure if I want to mark that one. They do say ahoy, and they say matey. That's two different ones there.
Ahoy,
she says it on the radio broadcast.
Yep.
There is an 18th century ship. The clipper ship sort of matches that description. The ghost ship that you see.
Yeah. Why clipper ships? I looked it up briefly, but I know Christian can explain it a whole lot better than I can. Like, why would a pirate or why would a sailor or anyone choose a clipper ship over other ones?
That is a good question. It was kind of used for
It
speed.
was sort of the ship of the time period, right?
It was for the time period. I think that dates it to being post 1850s. And I think they said something about, so they would have been talking about like 1880, which is super late for any defined piracy outside of like any Caribbean piracy or on the East Coast. Like that is well beyond when that actually took place. But yeah, clippers were known for being a lot faster, getting in and getting out. I don't think that actually serves any notable purpose in the movie, what kind of ship they had. I just think it helps it to date to that period.
Well, and I think maybe the original ship that it was based on was a clipper ship as well.
Yeah, because I think that was like 1850s.
Had something to do with it.
There is a curse because the town gets cursed when they commit the bad evil act, right? They don't say the word booty, unfortunately.
No, they don't. Sad day.
There's almost a hook for a hand, but it is not an actual prosthetic. It is just a tool.
I mean,
and that's basically
you're probably
it.
pretty close to be covering all of them. Yeah, there wasn't.
It's got about 4. It's got 4 solid ones, so that might be the least we've done. But it's in present day.
Yeah,
so
well, and this is different a Pirate of Jason movie.
Yeah, it's Pirate of Jason movie. But that's what's interesting about this movie, right? Is on paper, it really doesn't have that much to do with any of it at all. But in form and in the parlance of our time, the vibes of the movie, is fits very much in this wheelhouse of stuff that we've been watching for the podcast.
Yeah,
it fits well within that.
I agree with that. Okay, so in terms of our ratings, so if you're new to the show, first of all, welcome. I know that you're over an hour into this at this point, but
congratulations.
Congratulations. We're glad that you have joined us. If you're unfamiliar with how our ratings work, we have a scale which is called the Pieces of 8. We rate the movies in a general sense and a piratiness sense on a scale of 0 to 8. I can start us off if you guys would like.
Yeah.
So for my general rating for The Fog, I gave it a 7 out of 8. I thought about going 7.5, specifically because it occurs on my birthday. Decided maybe I shouldn't let that influence my rating. But I loved it. I thought it was fantastic. 7 out of 8, it's up there with some of the really strong ones that we've done so far. Piratiness, there's not a whole lot there. I gave it a 2 out of 8. I really could have gone lower than that, but I didn't want to because we're still pretty early in the show. I didn't want to go too low because there are some piratey things about this, even though they're, still up in the air whether or not they're actual pirates or not.
Yes.
But I thought there were, some pretty piratey things. But it's real few and far between. So I'm going to go 2 out of 8.
For me, I think I'm going to give it a 7 out of 8 general rating as well. And I think for the piratiness, I'm going to give it a 3 out of 8.
Okay.
I'm going to do a 7 as well. I think it had some issues, but I think a lot of those would be cleared up giving it a second watch and paying more attention to detail. But in terms of the feel of this movie, this is one of the coolest movies I have ever seen.
Yeah.
So
it's a really cool premise.
Yeah, I'll have to watch some of his other stuff because I thought he blew this out of the park, and I'm surprised that he was upset with. But all passion projects, you never feel like you get it completely nailed.
Right.
Piratiness, I will give it a 3 out of 8. I think there were some instances to where it was definitely, if not it was not using the pirate name, but it was definitely playing up on a lot of the maritime lore that has been introduced to us through piracy and what we know as pirates, the look, the curses, the gold lust.
Yeah.
I think there's a lot of stuff in there that perhaps borrowed from those movies, but adapted it to a different kind of individual, which was a late 1880s fisherman.
Very good.
Cool. I can hear something in the background. I hear like a game show going on.
Oh,
in
yeah,
the background.
that's Hell's Kitchen
Somewhere.
going on in there.
Yes.
Nice.
It's raw.
So I didn't mention this yet, but I am curious to watch another John Carpenter movie, and we're not going to watch it on here. I don't know that it has anything to do with pirates at all, but The Fog was actually part of like a 2-movie deal with Avco Embassy Pictures, AVCO. And the other one, this is the first one out of those two. The second one is called Escape from New York. So I'd be interested to watch that at some point and just kind of.
Escape from New York is a really interesting movie. It's cool.
Have you seen it?
Yes.
Okay.
It's pretty cool.
I'll have to check it out because this one intrigued me enough to want to watch more. And I know that you said like Big Trouble in Little China, I think is one that we need to watch.
I think that's my
Not
favorite.
necessarily on Rated Aargh, but just like in general.
Yeah.
So there's like several John Carpenter movies that I haven't seen that I'm kind of really excited to watch at some point. So that'll be a lot of fun.
Wait.
Yeah.
All right. Anything else before we? Oh, actually, I say that. Should this movie be inducted into the Rated Aargh Pirate Cinematic Universe?
No. It's a great movie, but no.
I mean, I agree. I think no as well.
Great movie, but no, yeah. But
okay,
I've just found out that there's a 2005 remake.
Yes.
Yes, which is terrible.
By all accounts,
from everything I've heard.
I'd watch it out of curiosity, but
apparently he like approved for it to be made, but the studio that signed on, I think there was like 13 pages of script that they had written maybe when they signed it for
when
it.
they started.
And well, not when they started, but when the studio agreed to make it.
Okay.
And apparently it has like some major script issues. It's reportedly very bad.
Oh no.
It's one of those like, I think it's got a 4% on Rotten Tomatoes. Like it's one of those that, just like a really bad movie by all accounts. So I don't even know if that one would be worth watching.
Interesting.
But there is a video on YouTube that I found earlier when I was looking for clips and stuff, where they like compare scene by scene the movie, or like movies or the scenes that are similar in the movies. And it's, pretty spot on for the most part for some of those scenes. All right. Anything else about The Fog before we get out of here?
It's really cool.
Yeah. Listen to the soundtrack on a cool October day and you'll have a good time. Even if you haven't seen the movie.
It's a good soundtrack. Oh yeah, you can just enjoy the soundtrack for sure. All right, well, it's almost time for us to take this ship to port, but before we do, we wanted to make sure you found our proverbial message in a bottle detailing next month's movie of choice. So coming November 10th, we'll be taking a look at the second installment of the Pirates of the Caribbean, Dead Man's Chest. Thank you for watching. We hope you enjoyed The Fog, and we can't wait to see where our next adventure takes us.